Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of literature's biggest questions. When we talk about star-crossed lovers, are we watching a tragedy that was written in the stars from the very beginning? Or is it a story that's really just authored by their own foolish choices?
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? When you see these lovers who just can't seem to catch a break, are you watching the cruel hand of destiny at work, or are you simply seeing a tragedy that unfolds from one terrible decision after another?
Of course, the most famous example of all comes straight from Shakespeare. Right from the get-go, in the prologue of Romeo and Juliet, the audience is flat out told that these two are star-crossed. The stars, a huge symbol of destiny, have already aligned against them.
But on the other side of that coin, you have this idea of free will. The belief that we're the ones in the driver's seat, that our choices shape our lives, no matter what the stars might have in store. And right there, that sets up the ultimate showdown. Fate versus free will.
Okay, so let's start by building the case for destiny. What evidence does the play actually give us that suggests Romeo and Juliet, well, that they never really stood a chance?
The play is just soaked in the language of fate. I mean, the lovers are born into this ancient grudge that they had nothing to do with. The prologue calls them star-crossed. And even Romeo himself, right before he goes to the party and meets Juliet, he gets this bad feeling. He fears some consequence yet hanging in the stars. It's like he can already feel that his path is set.
And the prologue takes it even further. It tells us their love is death-marked. It says that nothing, absolutely nothing, could end their parents' feud except for their children's deaths. So their tragic end isn't just presented as a possibility, it's framed as this grim, unavoidable event needed to bring peace back to Verona.
All right, let's completely switch gears here. What if the stars had absolutely nothing to do with it? What if this whole tragedy was just a product of really bad decisions? And this, right here, is the heart of the free will argument. The idea that Romeo and Juliet weren't just helpless victims of destiny, but that they were the architects of their own disaster. They had choices, and at every single turn, they just seemed to make the wrong one. So, what were those choices?
Let's just look at this side by side. So on one hand, yeah, you've got these forces of fate. But on the other, you have this waterfall of impulsive choices. I mean, getting married after knowing someone for one evening, and Juliet faking her own death, that whole plan hinged on a startling miscalculation, and she didn't even make sure Romeo got the memo. These aren't cosmic forces. These are just plain, reckless decisions.
Some modern critics, like Alyssa Rosenberg, take this idea even further. She argues that the play, at its core, is really about immaturity. The tragedy doesn't come from some grand cosmic plan. It comes from the fact that it's about teenagers who have these deeply childish ideas about love, and their fantasy that death will solve all their problems, well, it tragically becomes real.
But it's not quite that simple. Another critic, Noah Berlatsky, has a great counterpoint. He suggests the play isn't just childish, it's about childishness. He points out that the adults in the story, the Capulets, the Montagues, they're just as impulsive and irrational as the kids are. As he puts it, adults behave like children with some frequency. And that just adds this whole other fascinating layer to the debate.
So now, let's take this whole debate and pull it out of the world of fiction. What happens when a story about star-crossed lovers isn't a play, but a real-world headline?
We're going to leave the fictional streets of Verona, Italy, and travel to the very real, war-torn city of Sarajevo, Bosnia, back in the early 1990s.
And here, we meet Bosko Brkic and Admira Ismik. He was an ethnic Serb, and she was a Bosniak Muslim. Their love crossed the brutal, violent ethnic lines of the Bosnian Civil War. Just like their fictional counterparts, they were trapped by a huge conflict they didn't create. So they made a choice. They were going to try and escape the besieged city of Sarajevo, together.
On May 19, 1993, as they tried to cross a bridge right on the front line, a sniper's bullet killed Bosko instantly. Admira was also hit, but she used her last bit of strength to crawl to his body, and she died there in his arms. For 8 days, their bodies lay together on that bridge, a truly horrifying symbol of a love caught in the crossfire of war.
And so here we are again, with the same question, but this time the stakes are so much higher. Was their death a tragic outcome of their own choice to run, Or were they just fated to be victims of these enormous forces around them? War, hatred, ethnic division? There's absolutely no easy answer here.
So why? Why do these stories, whether they're fiction or fact, grip us so powerfully? Well, the answer really comes down to their appeal to a very specific core human emotion. And that appeal is called pathos. It's a quality in a story that makes you feel this profound sense of sadness and pity. Both these stories are just drenched in it. We feel for the lovers, we feel for the world that failed them, and we feel for the incredible loss of everything that could have been.
A musician who wrote a song about Bosco and Admira put it perfectly. He said, "War intervened in love. That's the problem." In situations that are this extreme, whether it's an ancient family feud or a modern civil war, the normal rules of life, the laws of love, they just don't apply anymore. And it's that conflict that makes their stories so incredibly powerful.
And it's that conflict that really makes these stories endure. They last, they stick with us, because they force us to think about some of the biggest questions we have about life, love, and the forces that shape our world.
So, in the end, maybe the point isn't really about solving the debate between fate and free will. Maybe the real power of these stories is that they make us ask the question in the first place. It's the tension, the ambiguity, and the tragic beauty of that very question that endures.
Which leaves us with one last really challenging thought. Both sets of lovers, the real and the fictional, defied the opinions of the world around them. So it makes us ask, should the opinions of others, our family, our society, a nation at war, affect our own personal choices, or even our destinies? That's a question we each have to answer for ourselves. Thanks for joining us on The Explain.